The only light on the 14th floor was the pale, blue-white moonbeam slicing through the panoramic window of the CEO's corner office, a space Leo Thorne rarely occupied after sunset. Tonight, however, a different, furtive glow had drawn him like a moth. Not from a forgotten monitor or a faulty exit sign, but from the freight elevator alcove, a small, determined circle of yellow dancing over the pages of a book. Leo stood in the shadows, his $3,000 suit feeling like a costume. He was playing Undercover CEO, a whimsical, self-aggrandizing idea he'd gotten from a reality TV show. He wanted to see the unvarnished truth of his empire, Ethelgard Industries, from the ground floor up. He'd expected to see cutting corners, maybe some late-night fraternizing. He hadn't expected to find a ghost. The ghost was a security guard, young, his face all sharp angles and shadows in the erratic light. His name tag, barely visible, read, Elias. He was hunched on an upturned milk crate, a thick textbook, Principles of Structural Engineering, propped on his knees, a cheap flashlight clamped between his teeth. The beam trembled with his breathing, illuminating complex diagrams and dense equations. The sight was so anachronistic, so profoundly out of place in his sleek, sterile temple of innovation, that it stole the air from Leo's lungs. He watched for 10 minutes. The guard's focus was absolute. A hand would rise to turn a page, the other making a quick note in a dog-eared notebook. There was a reverence in the gesture, a hunger that was almost physical. Leo, a man who had built a billion-dollar company on recognizing disruptive potential, felt a jolt that had nothing to do with profit margins. He stepped out of the shadows. The floorboard creaked. Elias startled, the flashlight clattering to the floor, its beam rolling in a wild arc. He shot to his feet, the book tumbling, his face a mask of pure panic. "Sir, I can explain." "Relax," Leo said, keeping his voice low, non-threatening. He bent down, picking up the flashlight and the book. The spine was cracked, the pages filled with underlines and annotations in tiny, precise handwriting. "Elias, is it?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Thorne. I know this is against protocol. I'll accept the write-up. Just, please don't confiscate the book." The plea was raw, desperate. Leo ignored the use of his name. His cover was blown, but it didn't matter anymore. He thumbed through the pages. Structural engineering. Heavy reading for a graveyard shift. Elias's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. "It's the only quiet time I get." "Why?" The question was simple, but it hung in the air, charged. A long silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the server room down the hall. Elias finally looked up, and Leo saw the shadows under his eyes weren't just from the poor light, they were etched there by exhaustion. "My father," Elias began, his voice husky. "He was a construction worker. He died when a walkway on a site collapsed. Shoddy materials, faulty calculations. The official report called it an avoidable tragedy." He gestured to the book in Leo's hands. "I was 12. I promised myself I'd learn how to build things right. Things that don't fall down on people." The words landed like a physical blow. Leo's mind flashed to the Ethelgard Towers project, his newest, most ambitious venture, a gleaming residential complex built with cost-effective, prefab materials his engineers had assured him were perfectly safe. A cold trickle of unease, one he'd been suppressing for months, began to worm its way down his spine. "That's a noble reason," Leo said, his voice softer than he intended. "But why here, in the dark?" Elias gave a bitter, hollow laugh. "The scholarship ran out after my mom got sick. Life got expensive. This job pays the bills. The rent, her medical bills. It doesn't leave much for tuition." He looked around the dark, empty office. "But this building, it's a masterpiece. Sometimes, when I do my rounds, I just look at the steel skeleton in the elevator shafts, the load-bearing walls. It's like studying a living body. This is the only classroom I can afford right now." Leo felt a profound shame, hot and acidic. He'd been this young man, once. Hungry, brilliant, and broke. He'd just forgotten what it felt like. He'd surrounded himself with yes men and profit forecasts, losing the language of struggle, of raw, unvarnished dreams. "Your dedication is humbling, Elias," Leo said, handing the book back. "Consider this your final night on the graveyard shift." Elias's face fell, a look of utter devastation transforming his features. "Sir, please, I need this job." Leo placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm promoting you. Effective Monday, you're a junior intern in the structural engineering department. Your tuition at the state university is covered. All of it." The shock on Elias's face was a canvas of disbelief, then dawning, tremulous hope. His eyes glistened in the dim light. I don't know what to say. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. Thank you. You won't regret this." As Leo walked away, leaving the young man standing in a pool of moonlight, his own emotions were a turbulent sea. He felt a surge of paternal pride, a rediscovery of his own humanity. But beneath it, Elias's story about his father echoed, a dissonant chord that grew louder with every step he took towards the private elevator. Shoddy materials, faulty calculations. The words were now inextricably linked in his mind to the smiling faces of his project managers and the sleek renders of Ethelgard Towers. He had set out to change a life tonight. He had no idea that life was about to change his. The following months were a whirlwind. Elias, freed from the financial shackles, blossomed. He was a natural in the engineering department, his practical, hands-on understanding from his nocturnal studies, complementing the theoretical knowledge he devoured in class. He was quiet, respectful, but fiercely intelligent, asking questions that stumped senior engineers. Leo watched his progress with a pride that felt suspiciously like a father's. He became Elias's unofficial mentor. They shared lunches in Leo's office, discussing everything from tensile strength to philosophy. Leo learned about Elias's mother, her slow but steady recovery, and the small, proud smile she'd given him when he'd told her about his internship. In turn, Leo shared stories of his own early failures, the garages and ramen noodles, the parts of his history he'd sanitized for Forbes interviews. One crisp autumn afternoon, Elias was in Leo's office, reviewing schematics for a new corporate park. The Ethelgard Towers project was nearing completion, a gleaming spear of glass and steel piercing the skyline. It was Leo's legacy, his name literally etched in stone at its base. "Something's been bothering me, Leo," Elias said, his brow furrowed. He'd started using Leo's first name a few weeks prior, a milestone that had filled the older man with a quiet joy. "About the park. The zoning permits are a nightmare, I know," Leo said, sipping his espresso. "No, not that." Elias's voice was tense. "It's the towers. I've been running some independent calculations on the lateral load capacity, cross-referencing the material specs from the supplier, Apex Composites." Leo felt a familiar, cold trickle. "And the numbers, they don't add up. Not for the wind shear we can expect at that height. The alloy grade they shipped is a lower spec than what was signed off on. It's a subtle difference, but over 48 stories," he trailed off, his eyes wide with the horror of his own conclusion. "It's the walkway collapse, all over again. Just on a massive scale." The air left the room. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. Shoddy materials, faulty calculations. The ghost of Elias's father had just walked into his office. "Show me," Leo commanded, his voice a rasp. For an hour, Elias walked him through it, his notations a frantic, angry scrawl across the pristine blueprints. The evidence was undeniable. Someone, likely in collusion with the supplier, had cut corners, pocketing the difference and betting no one would be the wiser. They had bet on the foundation of Leo's trust in his name. A storm of rage, betrayal, and fear brewed inside Leo. He thought of the families who would move in, the children who would play on the balconies. He saw headlines, lawsuits, ruins. And he saw Elias's face, the ghost of a 12-year-old boy who had already lived this nightmare. He made calls. He summoned his most trusted, or who he thought were his most trusted, executives. A frantic, internal investigation was launched. The truth was uglier than he could have imagined. The corruption went to the top of the project management team, men he'd known for decades. The scandal erupted like a silent bomb. There were no public headlines, not yet. Leo contained it with the ruthless efficiency that had made him a billionaire. The executives were fired, their careers and reputations obliterated. Apex Composites was sued into oblivion. A massive, costly retrofitting project for the towers was initiated immediately, a secret operation conducted under the cover of final touch-ups. It would cost him tens of millions. He didn't care. Through it all, Elias was his rock, his moral compass, the one person he could trust. The night the final corrupt executive was escorted from the building, Leo called Elias to his office. The city lights twinkled below, a galaxy he'd once felt he owned. "You saved us, Elias," Leo said, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. His hand was trembling. "You saved hundreds of lives. You saved this company. You saved me from becoming the very thing I set out to destroy." Elias accepted the glass but didn't drink. He looked older, the boyish hope in his eyes replaced by grim, hard-won wisdom. "I just did what anyone should have done. But no one else did." Leo raised his glass. "To you, my protege, my friend, the future of this company." Elias finally met his gaze. "Why did you do it, Leo?" Leo froze, the glass halfway to his lips. "Do what? The promotion, the tuition." "Elias, after what you just uncovered." "No," Elias interrupted, his voice quiet, lethally calm. "Not that. Why did you approve the substandard materials for the towers in the first place?" The world tilted. Leo felt the floor drop away. "What? I didn't. The investigation just proved." "The investigation proved what you wanted it to prove," Elias said, placing his untouched glass on the desk with a definitive click. "The project managers were greedy and guilty, yes. But the initial cost-cutting directive, the suggestion to value engineer the core structural components, it came from you." Memo dated February 14th. "I found it buried in the server archives." "You signed it." Leo's blood ran cold. He remembered that memo. It was a broad, general directive, sent during a tense quarterly report. Find efficiencies. Maximize ROI. He'd never specified structural integrity. He'd trusted his team to know the lines not to cross. But he had set the tone. He had created the pressure cooker environment where this kind of corruption could flourish. He was the root cause. I never meant," he stammered, the words ash in his mouth. "You never do," Elias whispered, and the sound was filled with a bottomless, heartbreaking disappointment. "Men like you never do. You sit in your glass offices and you push for numbers, for growth, for a legacy. You forget that your decisions have weight. Real weight. The kind that kills fathers." The truth of it was a physical pain. Leo looked at the young man he loved like a son and saw the ghost of his own compromised soul reflected back at him. He had not pulled the trigger, but he had loaded the gun and handed it to a willing subordinate. Elias stood, removing his Ethelgard security pass and placing it gently on the desk beside the whiskey glass. "My mother is better. The medical bills are paid. My final tuition was wired this morning. Thank you for that." He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. He didn't look back. "My father's name was Robert Vale. The company he worked for was Ethelgard Construction. Your father's company." And with those final, shattering words, Elias Vale walked out, leaving Leo Thorne utterly, completely alone in the ruins of his own life, the city lights below blurring into a meaningless, beautiful constellation he could no longer bear to see.